Yes, sir.
All right, I'm going to add one more. One second.
All right.
I've lost way too much fucking shit, bro. I'm going to make sure you record that.
No, I understand.
He have a fucking midlife crisis in his 50s. Fucking if he didn't get this recorded.
I know it, right? He'll have a double one. He's already had.
You'll hear about him in the paper tomorrow. You'll be like, God damn, Bradfield, what are you doing?
He's like,
all right, guys.
I'm back.
We're back. So,
all right.
So,
Michael, I had a question that I was going to ask you as well. So basically, the government helped fund help fund and weaponize a flu virus, the gain of function, and basically took the HIV virus and mutated it with the flu virus and came up with COVID-19.
I don't know that for sure. That's what some people think.
Yeah, that's what I've read on it. You know that in the response to the government response, right? You know, they put out a unproven vaccine that's injured people. Well, my personal experience from it, dude. My father died 4 days after getting the vaccine.
Right.
I still went and got the vaccine. I mean, it's part of it, man. I mean, he was older as well. I mean, it's just in poorer health as well. We all got to die, man. So I appreciate it. And same way with your aunt, man. I hope she pulls through it and everything works out.
Yeah. And both of my parents have been vaccinated and they hadn't had any issues. You know, so I pray that it stays that way. But
I've had 4 of them.
And I'm Native American, man. So I definitely have a little bit of sympathy towards this conspiracy theory or whatnot, because they did my people dirty in the past, real dirty.
Right.
So you can't put it past them that, you know. My question would be what would be the motive behind it? You know, what kind of power grab? It'd have to be something pretty extraordinary though for money. They can just print more money.
There's got to be a plus.
Yeah. Well,
at that level, you know what I mean. I think that's kind of the hang up that a lot of people had, that I have with it as well.
Well, you have some of the people that are involved. Of course, you've got Bill Gates pushing it really hard, and you've got some of those people pushing it really hard. And those,
but are they trying to thin the herd, knowing that we're having that we're having a population issue? I mean, we're having a population with childbirth rates, and we've been having them for decades throughout the world, not only here but throughout the world.
Right.
So why would they kill off a bunch of people and short themselves the population, knowing that they're getting ready to have their own shortfall coming?
Yeah, I don't understand it. I just know
let's just back up one second though, because like we're talking about the vaccine and the disease that we've all went through, and like we all know the educational impairments, we know about the workplace impairments. We know this is a controversial thing. I know that, you know it. We all know it. Again, I work with industries that made me take it. If I walked in the building, I'd have it.
Right.
But I've had to do it. I've not had any problems out of it necessarily.
Right. But I know people haven't had problems with it.
But I think we're all in agreement that it should have been a choice though, and not forced. So I think everybody's in agreement with that.
Should not have been mandated. If you wanted to get vaccinated, go get vaccinated. But if you didn't, you shouldn't have lost your job or been kicked out of the military or any of that sort of thing, because that's a whole another load of mess right there, because that's all a big lie anyway. But now they just recently passed a bill about that. I think like Friday I got a thing where Biden and the Congress. Yeah, they're not reinstating everybody though. They don't have to take it anymore. That's the only problem, is you had 8,000 soldiers were removed because they wouldn't take the vaccine, and they're not being reinstated or anything like that. So that they didn't go to that point, So, but just to finish the story about that doctor, that lady, what she said. She said after that lady told her that, after that congresswoman told her that, she began to do her own research, and after she did her own research, she moved to Mexico. And Jesse's like, why did you move to Mexico? She said, I'm not telling you it's going to happen tomorrow. And I think this interview was like 2009, 2010, somewhere in that. She said, I'm not telling you it's going to happen tomorrow, but pretty soon something's going to happen, and everybody in the world is going to be begging for a vaccine. And I'm telling you right now, that vaccine is going to be bad news. And I needed to be in a country where I was not going to be made to take that vaccine. And he said, so what are you doing when you leave here? She said, I'm going back home to Mexico. She said, I came here to do this interview, and I'm going right back. She flew her own plane up there. And so all I can say past that to put any validity to what she said is, where did Jesse Ventura move to after he started making that show?
Hey, he's lived in Mexico for
dual
citizenship. Actually,
yeah.
He's not full time.
Yeah, so, but he spends most of his time in Mexico. And if they ever want him to come up here and make an appearance, like on a news thing, like if he's, there's a few times I've seen him on like Good Morning America and stuff like that. He drives the entire way. He won't get on a plane anymore. And he said it's because of things that he's discovered on that show. When he was doing that show, the things that he discovered, he won't fly anymore. He said, I'm going to take myself where I need to go, and if I can't take myself there, I'm not going. And
right. I mean, without knowing the people involved, though, you got to understand their skepticism about it, though. Because you're saying that some lady that's a doctor flew down.
Well, I don't remember her name.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I don't remember her name. I just remember seeing the show when it happened.
Because I know that he does live with a group of people in Mexico, so with some pretty rich and affluent people, that they have their own compound community in Mexico. But that's because somebody says it, if if the ex-president came out and said it or something like that, it'd still be you still have to pass the skepticism of it, man. But
and I'm not
to accept it, because you're talking extraordinary claims.
And I'm not saying it's the end all. All I'm just saying is it's just another piece of that puzzle that adds on top of. It's just another piece of that puzzle that adds on top of all the other stuff that's going on. And the fact that was said 10 years ago or 12, 13 years ago.
I don't put it past our government.
It was just creepy. When I went back and watched it here 5 or 6 years ago, even before COVID happened, I thought, wow, that's pretty creepy. Because
I don't put it past them at all,
brother.
They could easily, they're easily using viruses. They've used germ warfare. They use chemical warfare. We are the military-industrial complex. There's something to be explored in the terms of warfare. Either we're doing it or we've already done it. And if we're not doing it, that means it wasn't very fruitful because we've already done it.
Well, it was funny because me and some guys were talking at church the other day, and this one guy said, and I have gotten the flu vaccine, I don't know how many times over the years, myself. And but we were talking, and this guy said, I worked at this certain place, I don't remember, and he said there was an older gentleman that worked there that actually fought in World War II. And this guy's kind of an older guy, and he said, but when we were coming up, they started doing the flu vaccines. He said that guy would never get the flu vaccine. And they would tell him, well, if you miss any days for the flu, it's going to be counted against you and all that kind of stuff. He said, okay, well, I'm not taking the flu vaccine, And he said, we all got the flu vaccine. He said, and guess who never got the flu? It was the guy that never got the flu vaccine.
Well, that may be. I think that's an even bigger conspiracy theory as far as the yearly flu vaccine and how the results they get from it.
And I know
calling it a vaccine is just the results of it aren't vaccine results. So
right, and so it can be completely. But the other thing too about the COVID vaccine, is that you and I have been taught. You and I have been taught vaccines work a certain way our entire lives. And we've been taught that once you get the vaccine, hey, you're not going to get it. You can't spread it. None of this stuff's going to go on. And this happens this way, and this happens this way, and this happens this way. But all of a sudden, with this vaccine,
I didn't believe that.
But that's what you've been taught. You see what I'm saying?
Hey,
you've been told that your whole life. But this time,
I won't get
it's completely different.
with the flu, I don't get the flu. Like, there are times that I did not have the vaccine, I got the flu. But when I get it, when I get the flu vaccine, I don't get the flu, but I may care to everybody else. That's just my opinion.
Right. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not telling you the flu vaccine or whatever is a bad deal. I've had it several times. I've had it several times. So, like I said, I've never been an anti-vaccine person, but this one is just creepy. It's just creepy. It's too fast. It's just
I
too
agree
much
with that.
around it, and the way that their language changed on it. You know, that now that all the rules that you've been taught since you were a kid, now they're changing them, and it's like, why is all this stuff I've been taught for so many years suddenly changing because this vaccine comes along? And why are they mandating that you get it? You know, and it's just like, man, this is
just to kind of, break that down for just a moment. We were taught to do math a certain way when we were kids, back during, the 70s and 80s. And, I tried to help some kids do math in my household during the time, and that math was not the same. I was told things then. You borrow this, carry the one, and that shit didn't add up. So, hey, technology changes, the ideas change and stuff. The particular vaccine, I understand the people's reticence with it because of exactly what we was discussing before. Look, they took so much time. There was so much research. Now, the scary part is, and here's where I kind of wonder, maybe it wasn't a conspiracy, but at the same time, that could still be capitalism involved, was the case of, like, we were talking about the RNA and stuff. These are technologies, like, in 1995, the fastest processors were the Pentiums. If you look at processors for us that we heard about. The actual Intel Pentium processors were developed for the military 10 to 18 years before it became even public knowledge. So, I kind of wonder if, some of this technology we think is new. Look at the advent of the super Tesla magnet, the sudden influx of fusion technology. That crap has been simmering under the surface, and we just don't know about it. And now it's just politically expedient, to, make it public, make announcements.
Right.
So a lot of these things that people think are conspiracies, like, well, why did this suddenly happen? It didn't just suddenly happen. It's been kind of going on. It's just nobody has really talked about it. And there are people of note and, renown that have been involved with some of those things. But, again, they still perceive things from their own experiences. They may have been conspiracy theorists thinking JFK, went to the moon 4 or 5 times. So it's all perspectives and how you discuss it. It's just having the idea of, like, I'm not going to take what you're selling at face value. I understand you're giving me the basic information, but I don't think you're telling me everything. The level of skepticism. Yeah, it's the level of skepticism where some people, they get to the point of you're so skeptical, you actually do nothing. You get nothing accomplished because you're always worried about somebody's lying to you. There's got to be that point of you're a follower or a leader. If you're a leader, then make some decisions and move forward regardless of the outcome or the cost. If that don't work, if you can, then take a step back and go in a different direction. But everything starts with the first little step. If you ain't growing, you're dying. If you're not learning, you're dying. So I won't say everything was on the up and up, but I think something surprised somebody, and they tried to come out with something, and I don't know how effective it was, and now they're going, oh, shit, we overreacted. We could have just said, all right, if you're old and fat or you've got some underlying condition, stay your ass at home. Everybody else, have fun,
Right.
go party. You know?
Right. Well,
My
you know,
opinion,
and the thing, yeah, I mean, and the whole thing was the death rate for COVID in the first place. You know, was mainly centered around the very elderly or people who already had some pretty serious health issues, and it was still less than 1%. You know, the survivability was still over 99%. And so, and everybody's rushing out to get this, you know, vaccine for something that hasn't proven to be that deadly at the time, you know. And so it was just, it just all smelled funny to me, you know. And so I was always kind of skeptical. Now, when it comes to the things that people say, I take it all in, and just like I'm sitting here saying things. Some of it, I completely realize that some of it could be conjecture, and some of it could be something that's brought up, you know, that's been blown up way past what it is.
Right, but you
all
believe
those sort of
what
things,
you believe.
You believe what you believe.
But you still believe what you believe, and I got to respect what you believe. I can't say, you're just stupid for that. Well, maybe you think I'm stupid for that. No. It's a respect thing. I mean, everybody has their own personal choices to make. I'm sorry.
And even no, you're good. And even if I believe that the vaccines are completely terrible, you know, it's still my hope at the end of the day. My hope at the end of the day is still the same as yours is that whether the vaccine is good or the vaccine is bad, it's my hope that nobody else is injured or dies from it. From it or from COVID or from whatever else, you know.
Or there's going to be a net benefit. I mean, that it will actually overall improve things for people. That's all we can ever hope.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
We just hope it doesn't make it worse. Yeah.
Yeah. At the end of the day, no matter whether we believe a conspiracy theory or not or whatever, most people are on the same page when it comes to their consensus of what they hope happens. And that's that we hope that life is improved for everyone. And so that's really what matters. You know, Brad and I talk about that when it comes to politics. You know, there's so much out there. What gets sensationalized nowadays is the far left, you know, viewpoints on things and the far right viewpoints on things, when we know that the majority of Americans are somewhere just off of center. You know, we all really kind of desire better for everybody. You know, because most people who are really liberal aren't wishing bad on people who are conservative, and conservatives aren't sitting over here wishing bad on people who are liberal. It's just that's not how American people are. You've got some far left extremists and you have some far right extremists, and the media blows that way up out of proportion to cause more division. And it's so crazy that they would want to cause all this division or be a part of it, you know. And so that's, you can just tell that stuff is sensationalized, you know. I noticed that stuff when I was a kid, when I shouldn't have really even been able to tell or know any better. When I was a kid, before I even knew what a conspiracy theory was, I could see the news anchors and stuff
sensationalized.
Why are they doing this, you know?
I want us to back up from this, because, you know, that's controversial. But I guarantee you that if we all look at something a bit more spiritual, I think we can. Let's drill down one layer below where we're at now. Because
you said you wanted to go deep.
That's what I want. I want to go down.
Too deep.
I want to go deeper.
So you want to get out of conspiracy down and go into the spiritual matter. So.
I do.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think that, but now I think that there's, you know, if you go deeper beyond, you're going to find meaning, and you're going to find more agreement. And the further you go down, because like we all found a place to agree on that. You know, and it's not perfect to be good or bad. We all want everybody to be better. If it works, it works. And if it truly is, you know, time will tell. But now,
but the biggest thing about that is just the non-judgmental of the hey, if we don't get to the same place, I can still respect where he's at. So, I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, you're good.
Yeah. So, but now, so let's go a little bit deeper here, and like with me, I always think about something deeper. I understand that I've got to start here with everybody because this is what everybody's talking about. That's what the main thing is. It's like everybody's trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong, all this kind of stuff. But to me, I don't even. To me, it's deeper than that. It's like, again, I always talk about the fact that I'm on a ball of dirt, rock, and water, spinning around a ball of nuclear fusion, and with all these other folks around me. So, where should we go from here? I want to go deeper. I want to hear about something spiritual. I want to hear about what ties us together instead of what divides us.
Well, I mean, one of the biggest things for humanity is the belief in something bigger. And again, I mean, we're going to go back to the open-minded, and I know Cliff. He said he found Jesus very early, and I'm glad you have found peace and satisfaction in the belief in those writings and how he believes. I just always believe, there's something bigger. It's small-minded to believe the writings meant by people that you read in that black book is the end-all, be-all. There's something more. I think you can find God in any form, shape, or fashion you choose. It's anything bigger than yourself that gives you hope, belief. And again, I know the black book is written as a great guide, and I totally believe in everything in there. When it comes to just being a decent human being, just not necessarily all the parables involved, but now that's me and my personal belief,
Right.
But I think, the overall spirituality is we are a very tiny thing in a very big universe. And it was all created by something way bigger than me, you, and anything on this planet. My opinion.
Right.
$60, you can go to Starbucks and get a cup of coffee. I made it to 60, Brad.
That sounds like 4 now, bro. That's like $50 a cup of coffee. That's some crazy shit. Kid, where you at with what we're talking about?
The religion? Yeah, I'm with Don on it that I don't necessarily think it's, by that exact black book. Maybe the stories are something that people at the time could relate to, maybe more understand, put it in simpler terms. Maybe some of that information was lost in translations, or some of it maybe was taken literally when it should have been figuratively. And then, the obvious thing we can't ignore is, all the evil things that have been done in the name of organized religion. That kind of makes you question religion itself, the organization of religion.
Yep. Yeah, and I agree. And that's even been done in the name of Jesus himself. But, whenever I read the Black Book, I realize that the people who perpetuated those acts were not acting upon the Black Book. They were living upon the ignorance that they could trust in at the time, the ignorance of the people, because, like whenever the Crusades were going on, for instance, the population at large couldn't read the Bible then because it was still in Latin. And, and so if the priest said, well, this is what the Word of God says, then the people, the only choice they had was to believe it. And so if the priest came to you and said, if you'll go fight this war for God, then your sins will be forgiven, son. And so what's he going to do? Well, then I got to go fight this war for God. Just like when a Muslim imam tells a Muslim that if he goes and fights this war for Allah, he'll die a good death and he'll have 70 virgins waiting on him when he goes to heaven, that sort of thing. These are people that are acting and perpetuating things because of the ignorance of the people that they were controlling at the time. So this is
Are you actually arguing in benefit that organized religion was made for that? I mean, because now I know you're not truly saying that. I mean, but you're absolutely correct, in terms of what you're talking about. But yeah, no, I was being facetious when I actually said that. But you know what I'm saying. But you're right.
Let me throw this to Cliff and everybody else here, because Cliff, I think that you could start us off with that Psalm 82 conversation, and I think we can go a little bit deeper, because we're just touching the surface, and nobody's going to agree about the surface. But now, if you go a little bit deeper there.
Okay, I will, but just to add to what you just said, yeah, I'm not a fan of organized religion, even though I attend a church. Okay, so I attend a church, and I'm well vested in the church that I attend, because the people that I attend church with believe the same way I believe.
Yeah, and again, I apologize. I was being facetious.
No, yeah, you have not offended me in any sort of way. I'm just explaining to you my position,
please.
and how that that's kind of why Protestantism happened to start with and grew into what it is today. Now, does that mean that all Protestant people or Protestantism is correct? No, that doesn't mean that at all. Because that too has also been used to manipulate people and control populations and all that sort of thing too. So it's that. But the thing that I've found is what the truth is, and you'll agree with this. The true thing that the Bible teaches us is that our purpose is our relationship with our Creator.
Absolutely.
That's our purpose. And that's what the Bible teaches us. And the difference between what the Bible teaches us and what some other world religions teach us is that our relationship at one point in our existence was fractured. And that our Creator loved us so much that He did things to be able to restore that relationship. And that's what the Bible's teaching us. And if we're willing to accept those things and we're willing to believe those things upon faith, then that relationship can be, in fact, restored. And that's the point of the Bible. And Jesus is just an example of that. He's a very important example of it. He's the life application of that, But that's really the crux of it. So
where does the Old Testament fall into that?
Well, even in
the old covenant, and that no longer partakes because Jesus sacrificed himself, and now he's the sacrifice.
Well, see, there's more than one covenant in the Old Testament. Okay,
right.
The first covenant was made with Abraham, and the covenant that was made with Abraham was a covenant of faith. After Israel had grown and become this, larger nation, and Moses came along and God brought his people out of Egypt and all that, and all this stuff was going on, and they were living all these crazy lives. That's when God brought them the law, the covenant of the law. And in the New Testament, Paul tells us, a second covenant comes along, it does not null the first covenant. It does not get rid of the first covenant. But the law was given to be a guardian. The law was given to keep evil from just running completely rampant, because giving people to just deal with their own devices, a lot of times it's going to go that way. So even when you read the Old Testament, you read about the life of David and Jacob, and Jacob, the father of the 12 patriarchs. That dude was a con artist. That dude was rough, and David killed thousands of people, and so these guys were, but God calls David a man after his own heart, and he calls, other people a friend of God, yet by our modern standards, we would say, this is not somebody I would want to know, and it wasn't because of it wasn't because of the life that they led. It was because of the faith that they had in their Creator, and the relationship that they had with Him, and the things that went on there. It can there's a lot of stories there, but back to the, because I can dog bird really easy and go off on other tangents, but back to it. So the first covenant was with Abraham.
Go ahead.
The first covenant was with Abraham, and it was a covenant of faith. So this will go back to where Brad was telling us the Psalms 82 thing. So let's go here real quick, okay? And it'll bring us back to this, and it'll give us more understanding. So in Genesis 11 and Deuteronomy 32, we read the story of the Tower of Babel. And the first king upon the earth by the name of Nimrod. And he wanted to build this great tower that would reach to God, to the heavens, which I don't think was a tower, an actual physical tower like the Eiffel Tower, because first he was building it in a valley, not on top of a mountain, because the ancients thought that, the gods lived on top of the mountains, which the Garden of Eden was on top of a mountain. There's all these different things, and the mountains were the places where the spirit world met the physical world, and the gods would pass back and forth, and but the Tower of Babel didn't fit that description, even though it was this tower to reach the gods. And so I think it could have been something more like what we would call nowadays maybe a Stargate, or something like that, some sort of portal, some sort of machine that would be a portal, And it says that God decided to come down and see what man was doing, and man was all one. Everybody spoke the same language. Everybody had the same goal in mind. They were all coming together to build this tower. And God said, man has reached such a place with his knowledge. There's nothing he can't accomplish. We can't let this happen. So let's confuse our languages. We're going to split them up into nations. And so he divides man into about 70 different nations. He gives them all different tongues. They can't understand each other anymore. All these sort of things happen to stop that, whatever they were about to accomplish, from accomplishing. And God was really put out with just every thought of man was on evil at that time. And so he said, I disinherit the nations of the earth. I'm taking myself out of the equation, and I'm going to let you guys, and this is now talking to the lesser gods, I'm going to let you guys rule over man, and you're going to take care of them. You're going to make sure that justice is done. You're going to look out for them. That he gave them things. You need to do these things for them, for mankind. And it names off the names of us, calls them the sons of Cain, but it's like 70 of them, so for each nation. And God says, I'll choose for myself my own nation. And so Nimrod, this king, he has a chief idol maker. And I don't remember the chief idol maker's name, but his son, the chief idol maker's son, his name is Abraham, or his name is Abram. Actually, his name is Abram. And he has a wife named Sarai. And so God chooses Abram and Sarai, changes his name to Abraham and Sarah, adds the H's to their names, which gives them a spiritual connotation, and says, I will form my own nation through you. And so God has disinherited all the other nations of the world. Now he's going to birth a new nation, Israel, through Abraham. And that's kind of how that story goes, and it's broken. Not a competition. It's not a competition. Just God's just gonna. He loves His creation, which is mankind. But he's so put out with the evil that's going on.
So he chose a team.
So he chose
a team, Israel. I mean, again, you go by the stories, and this is kind of. And look, I'm not putting that down. I was saying that as a thing, just as part of my brain. Is, I've always been taught God is perfect. So if God is perfect, then how could he make the mistake of like the Old Testament and the New Testament, and him having to give up power and make different covenants. If he's already perfect, then he doesn't have to give up anything. It means it was planned. Otherwise,
I'm sure it was.
Well, then why is it a covenant? Because it's already been planned. I mean, those kind of things lean to human terms in terms of certain things, came to pass. They go, well, this ain't working. All right, so we're going to make a new set of rules. And then that ain't quite working. Well, let's make another set of rules. See, that's more human. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I see where you're going, and I understand, but let me finish the story, and so maybe it'll kind of come together for you.
Okay. Please, go ahead. Yeah.
So, and I'm trying to give you the entire Bible in a short synopsis.
Well, no, I've actually read the Bible, so I know this story, but these are still just my questions. Yeah, but go ahead.
Right. So, well, and if you'll remember from Genesis chapter 6, story of Noah, do you gather why God destroyed the earth with water during Noah's time?
I do, but again, it goes back to
the Nephilim breeding with the wives of man.
Right. So the bloodline of men completely now is mixed with the blood of angels, except for Noah and his sons, because you can follow the genealogy all the way from Adam. Noah's the 10th man from Adam, and you follow it all the way down, and he was, and it even says Noah was perfect in his generations. It didn't say he was perfect in his actions. He was perfect in his generations. I mean, this is the last dude that's blood's not mixed with the blood of angels.
Well, now, and I agree with this, but now, again, let me throw this in here. Everybody talks about rednecks mixing with their cousins. That stuff happened in that area. So, again, we go back to parables written by people to have understandings. Don't do these things. The last pure person, this is the only one that ain't mixed. If I don't kill the rest of this family, you're going to have monsters. So, I go back to, was that truly written by benevolent billing, or was it written by somebody who didn't like it being their blood being mixed with somebody else?
The monsters are not the point. The point is that it was so prevalent, it had taken over so much, that there was no longer going to be an avenue for redemption, because there would never be a Messiah born if there was no longer a pure bloodline of just men on the earth.
Well, why did God allow it to get to that point?
Yeah, and then you started
this is the Old Testament. This is the Old Testament with the laws and all that before free will, correct?
Adam and Eve, and everybody's kin to Adam and Eve. Yep. We're all inbred. You started with one woman.
I get it. So
Adam and Eve were the same person, supposedly, correct? One was created from the other one.
Yeah, Eve.
Well, they're the same person.
Well, Eve. So Eve was made from the rib from Adam, of course. When Adam wasn't, and Adam wasn't a man on his own. He was just a creation from the dirt of the earth until the Spirit of God was breathed into his nostrils and made him a living being.
Which we know now is, well, and that's where I was getting at, is, which we also know by, even with the Bible standards, he made mistakes. He's not perfect.
Well, no, let me get on further. I'm still trying to. I'm just still trying to set up the narrative here. So I've got to get the backstory in there to get to the point. So, excuse me. So, and then of course the funny thing about Eve is her name wasn't Eve until after the fall. Adam named her after, because she wasn't seen as separate until after the fall. So he was man, she was woman, So you're not wrong in that. And then people have the theory of whether Adam and Eve were actually really an actual person or not, and I get that too. I don't necessarily have an opinion on that yet, because I hadn't really dove into that too much, because I don't think that's the point of what's being told there. But it's more about the fall.
No, it's a faith thing. You're right. Yeah, it's a parable. A lot of the Bible is parables. It's not untrue life lessons. I mean, it truly is life lessons. It's just, I don't care for the people that will take one section that fits to whatever their prejudice is and say this is what the Bible's about. Yeah. That's what bothers
that's manipulation.
Me. It's like, and see, if you take the whole book as a general, that is a great life guide. Totally. I mean, regardless of your religion, it's a good life guide.
Okay,
in general.
I want to go deeper with this Psalm 82, because there's a deeper shit here with this Psalm 82 thing. It's going to blow you guys away. I can assure you.
So God, He's, we're back to He's disinherited the nations, okay? And He's going to form His own nation. And so most people grow up because they've just listened to preachers their whole life, and they hadn't really studied their Bible in the original language and what it actually means and who He's actually speaking to. I mean, if we read our Bibles for what it actually meant and the audience it was written for, it's actually a really deeply spiritual book. It's not some Western scientific thing like we've been trained up in our whole lives. We've been raised in this Western science, modern, thing, and that's how we view everything, but that's not what the Bible is. The Bible is just this deeply spiritual thing, and it's 2/3 of it are dreams and visions. So it's not you can't science-fy that. You can't do that. So you do have to have some open-mindedness about it, just like you would with any other train of thought. But there's some other things that I think about that set the Bible apart from other writings, and I can talk about that later, but let's finish this thing. So we get to Psalms 82, and the Bible says that Elohim takes his seat amongst the Elohim. So God takes his seat amongst the gods in the divine council. Wow, we have a pantheon here. God is not the only God. But God is Big G God, the Creator. He is the great God, the high God, the Most High, the Lord God, the Most High. And there's all these lesser gods, the little G gods. And these are the guys that He put in charge of the other nations. And in Psalms 82, He's chastising them. He said, you didn't do what I told you to do. You didn't make sure that justice was carried out. You didn't take care of people like you should have been doing. You weren't pointing people towards good things for their lives. You used them. You seek to use them for your own gain. And now, since you've decided to do that, like the princes of the earth, you're going to fall. You're going to die. Because you didn't do what I assigned and told you to do. So God had a spiritual family that He had created before He created this earthly one. And so He told these lesser gods, because you haven't done what I told you to do, you're going to suffer for this. And you've caused mankind to suffer. And so now you're going to suffer. And so all through the Old Testament, God is concerned with His people. And when you see chastisement and things going on, and when God is, quote, punishing people, He's punishing His own people. You don't see Him going after these other nations and stuff to the point that you do His own people. Now people say, oh, well, the first thing He did is He went to Jericho. He told His people to go to Jericho and march around the city and make the walls fall down, go in there and kill every man, woman, child, and beast. But if you go back and read, what were these people in Jericho? He sent all the scouts in, sent out 12 spies, and 10 of them came back and said, we can't do anything to these people. We're grasshoppers to them. These are the remnant of the Rephaim. These are the sons of the King Achem. These are the giants. These are leftover Nephilim. And God says, wipe them out. Everything. All of it. And when I read some different historical scholars that go back and show so they're on the east side of the Jordan when they do this, where Jericho is. They're on the east side of the Jordan. Shows where before that, several years before that, the descendants of Esau, because, you had the split. You had Abraham, and Abraham had Isaac, and Isaac had Jacob and Esau. And Esau, of course, sold his birthright for a bowl of soup and ran off and did his thing and started his own people. The descendants of Esau went up the western side of Israel, of the Jericho, years before that, and wiped out tons of people through there. And now God has brought his people, the descendants of Jacob now, to the eastern side of the Jordan. And now he's routing out those leftover Nephilim on that side. Those are the people that's being taken out there when he's doing that. Excuse me. And so he goes on, and all these things happen. And of course, while they're in the wilderness, there's the bit where there's the serpent. Everybody's grumbling because they don't like that. They're eating quail every day, and manna from the heavens is on the ground every day, and they're grumbling because of this. We'd be better in Egypt, better off where we were slaves, and so on and so forth. And so it says these fiery serpents begin to bite the people, and the fiery, we know fiery means the poison burned, and the people were dying. And hey, Moses, talk to God, find out what's going on, tell them we don't want to be bit by these serpents anymore. We don't want to die anymore. And so Moses talks to God, and God says, Moses, I want you to fashion a bronze serpent, put it on a pole and stick it in the midst of the camp. Because Moses had already given the law, and God said that anything that hangs on a tree is cursed by God. And so he tells him to put the serpent on the pole, and everyone who gets bit by these serpents, you go and you look at this serpent on the pole, and you won't die. And Jordan Peterson made a pretty astute observation of that, where he said, the easy thing for God to have done would have just been snap his fingers and all the serpents go away. Just like if you had a child who was going through something hard in life, and if money's the thing that would solve it, you just gave them money and that solved their problem. You wouldn't necessarily be doing them much of a service by doing that. And he said, so God, in this sense, instead of just curing the problem of his children, he makes them braver. He gives them some other form of knowing they no longer have to be afraid of the serpents. Don't get rid of the serpents, just don't be scared of them anymore.
Through suffering, though.
And so, through suffering.
Okay.
So we keep going, and we get to the time of Jesus, and what does Jesus do? Of course, Jesus. You go back to the story of Adam and Eve, and when God has come in and found Adam and Eve, and they've sinned, and who told you you're naked, and all that, and he starts handing out those punishments. He says, he tells Eve that your seed will be at enmity with the seed of the serpent. He tells the serpent, you will bruise his heel, but he will bruise your head. And you kind of begin to understand that every man, and when I say man, I mean mankind, every mankind born after that, the union of a man and a woman is going to produce more of the same thing. So the seed of the serpent, over and over and over again. We're born and we grow up, children are the most selfish beings on the planet. Just the way it is. That's how they survive. Me. I'm hungry, change my diaper, I want something to eat, now give me something to play with, I want to eat again, that sort of thing. And all they know how to do is cry. And so you grow up from birth learning this lifestyle, this nature to serve oneself constantly. And the flesh I would acquire. I would akin to the serpent. The flesh is the serpent, And so it says there, when it comes up to Jesus' time, it says that God condemned sin and death to the flesh. And so then what does Jesus do? He hangs the flesh on a tree, on a pole, on a cross, and kills it. And so he was injured, of course, but he in fact killed the serpent, just as the book of Genesis said he would do. So, but sin and death were tied to the flesh, and not to the flesh and the spirit, or to the spirit. So now the spirit can be free, to continue to live, to continue to go on, and the flesh itself can die, but not the spirit. The spirit is eternal, will be eternal. And Jesus says something unique after he's resurrected. He says, "Now, Father, you have re-inherited the nations of the earth." So God has sent his Messiah, been able to do that, so that he could once again re-inherit all of the nations of the earth, with there being a way out. And then the New Testament also attests to the fact that the Old Testament guys who believed knew that God would redeem man some way. They might not have known the name of Jesus or Yeshua or whatever, but they believed that God would redeem his people, redeem whatever people chose him. It's in some way that he would redeem them. That for them, that faith, that was counted as righteousness for them. It wasn't the fact that they followed the law to the T. Because Jesus, of course, comes along and says, you can't do it. He's preaching the Sermon on the Mount, and you can tell the Pharisees show up, and he says, you've heard it said, don't commit murder, don't kill. But I say, if you hate your brother in your heart, you've committed murder already. And you've heard it said, don't commit adultery. But I say that if you look upon a woman with lust in your heart, you've committed adultery with her already. What's he telling them? He's telling them you can't be good enough. You can't be good enough to get yourself into heaven or to reach this level or whatever. It's not about you and what you can do. It's about your relationship with your Creator and knowing that He has made it possible for you to have that relationship with you and to be counted as righteous because of Him, not because of you. And so that's the point of it. And so Dr. Michael Heiser was talking about this stuff, and he was on a podcast. He was on a pagan podcast. And this pagan guy said, he's really into all these other gods and stuff. And he said, so what does the great God really want? Why did he do all this? And he said, well, basically he wants you back, And so somebody asked, well, why would he have done all this in the first place? And C.S. Lewis said, the greatest gift that you can give someone, anything we experience in life costs something. Anything that's worth having, you would say, costs something. I'm sure your dad, your fathers, or your mothers taught you that anything in life worth having, you're going to have to pay for in some way, And so C.S. Lewis said the greatest gift that God ever created was love, and it is His essence, who He is. But the only way that love can be experienced is by choice. And so man had to have the choice to choose Him, which means that God put Himself outside of the physical realm. He confined Himself to the spiritual world. And He set laws, what we might call Mother Nature or whatever, into motion on the earth. And He allows us to just go along, and hopefully through creation, says that He reveals Himself to man through His creation. Hopefully through creation, and any American Indian or Far Easterns, all this stuff through creation, through the things they see in the earth, they know that there's more. Just like you were talking about earlier, we know that there's more, that there's some other power out there past what we just see right here in front of us. And so, but all of that's designed to lead us back to our Creator. And so, but for us to experience His love and His grace and His mercy, we had to be able to experience pain and suffering. or we would never experience grace, mercy, love, healing, joy, all of those sort of things. I heard an old black man say it one time. He said, man, if it didn't ever rain, I wouldn't understand and appreciate the sunshine. You know, it's a simple thought, but that's really kind of what that all boils down to. And the fact that God loved his creation so much that he was willing to give himself as the ransom to redeem it. And so that was the point of Jesus, and that's the point of the scriptures in the Bible. And even though many themes in the Bible are, you know, throughout several other religions in the world, the recurring thing about the Bible that's different and set apart from those is the fact that it's about the Creator redeeming his creation. That's the thing that sets it apart, is different, is that he, because of his love, wanted to redeem his creation and wanted his creation to have the opportunity and the choice to do so. And so he went through all those things and did all of that stuff. And so
right now, but here my overall question though is you're getting to you're hitting a lot of different things as far as that goes. Mm-hmm. My question is you talk about so the old covenant is no longer, it's still on. Well, so Jesus, you're telling me that people that follow the Old Testament and the New Testament now that's not, well, the doctrine's not accepted.
Well, no, the first
religion. What religion do you belong to first? Let's start there. What doctrine do you believe in?
Well, I attend a church that is, it's probably closest to Baptist, but it's not traditional. So I don't know how to explain it really. A lot of the major tenets are the same as say a Baptist church, but
either you follow the churches. I mean, each church has their own set of laws. Either you follow them or you don't. So it's okay to be a non-denominational as well. Now, I'm just curious as to follow what principles you're trying to explain to me.
Yeah, I'm explaining to you the principles of Cliff Pennington.
Because a lot of that you're saying is conjecture. Yeah, a lot of it's conjecture that you're saying, or other people's interpretations, kind of like Don was alluding to. The Bible is a book of parables.
Right. And I get that. So that
organized religion
that leads us to faith.
Right. And when organized religion gets together, it's a group of people saying, we interpret this story as this, and therefore we're going to start our own group of people that this is what God said. And then somebody else can read the same thing and interpret it the way they want it to and say that this is our truth.
Well, where I go to church, different. Where I go to church, the preaching is the preaching is expository.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, where I go to church, all of the preaching is expository. So it's not you don't take a verse here and a verse there and a verse here and a verse there and you try to say something with it. We take a section of Scripture. We take in all the historical context of what was going on in the area at the time, where that was written, who it was written to. You take if it was written in Hebrew.
What's your historical? What's your historical marker though? The only books that you have are written by secondhand people. So what other historical books are you using?
The Torah? The Torah is part of it. I mean, because you have the Old Testament, of course, the Old Testament written, is all gathered up and written when it was, and then, of course, it was all translated to Koine Greek 400 years before the birth of Jesus. And then when
absolutely
it comes to
correctly, word for word, by the way. They did not mistranslate, didn't take any current situations about how women are treated or how they treated women, or what I was going to say earlier is you was also saying, hey, most people couldn't read. They had to listen to what other people say. So were people so good back then that they didn't just kind of twist it enough to make them fight for what they wanted? I mean, without hearing...
I'm sure there are people that did that. I'm sure there are people that do that. Here's the part that goes past that. So the thing is that when it comes to that, we have that translation, of course, that collection of the Old Testament from well before the birth of Jesus. That's had. And so then we come across in 67, they find the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that sort of thing. And so we go through and they check the translations. Now they've got a range of time periods.
Well,
because
when they built the Tower of Babel, they all had organized language and all that, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then God's the one that dispersed them and made them all to where they couldn't communicate and whatnot, correct?
Right. And we understand that the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, was all come from Moses. He didn't write it. There were different scribes that wrote it. They believe there were 3 different scribes that wrote the first 5 books. And those first 5 books supposedly came from Moses himself. But, Moses was not there for Adam and Eve. He was not there for creation. Those things were passed down by oral tradition. We know those things. We also know that Judaism.
Even mentioned in Isaiah. Lilith equal to Adam. You know how many times Lilith's mentioned in the Bible? 1 time it's mentioned in Isaiah 34. Lilith equal to Adam. 1 time. It's nowhere else. So was that selective? Yeah, so there's a lot of just interpretation, and
what I'm getting at is that I got you, but what we have at the moment is this. All we have is we have what we have nowadays, and we have it to compare to the oldest manuscripts we have, and for the most part, compared to other works of antiquity, the Bible is proven by far, by a vast majority amount, to be the most accurate of its age.
Okay,
now,
how do you explain the same stories in ancient Egypt?
Well, because
how do you explain the same flood stories and the same stories of creation that are dated older than the Bible?
Yes, because what I just told you, Judaism was not the first religion. It's not the oldest. I completely understand that.
The Bible is the interpretation of past events that have been put into the Bible. So a lot of those stories could be, overinflated. I mean, all right, Noah's flood. With the geographical area and stuff. Yes, Noah's flood could have happened, but it would not have been the entire world. It would have been geographical.
Well, some people believe in
worldwide. Right. That's the belief.
Some people believe some people believe in localized flooding, and some people believe in the worldwide flood, and some people. I get it. I know all the different views.
Why would you load up two of every animal, bro, on a regional flood?
Right. No, and I get it.
They're hitting at a worldwide flood. I mean, that's kind of what they're getting at with the parables.
And there's even
my point is that these are all parables. My point I'm getting at is that they're all parables, and they have an underlying story or a lesson to teach people. And the bad part about this is that man can get a hold of these parables and either change the parables, add or delete parables, or add or delete books in the Bible, depending on the time of history. I think that the truth is so intricate and we're so simple-minded that there's no way in our language and our understanding that we'd even understand the complexity of God. And for people to sit there and you're sitting there and saying that you understand God's thoughts and you understand what He meant.
No.
You just said that. But you just said that. You said that God wanted to, God told certain people to kill other people and certain things, and God even told people to make sacrifices in the Old Testament.
Yeah, according to what we're reading there. I was telling you the general of what that's saying, what those stories that we have there in the Bible, what that is saying. Okay? And we've already agreed that. We've already agreed that, I believe them. I believe them. But I also...
there you go. That's
Yeah, I totally get that. I understand that. I'm way past thinking that everybody is going to think the way that I think or believe the way that I believe. I don't even agree with like everybody I go to church with.
Right.
You know
No, you shouldn't. You probably shouldn't.
Yeah. No.
Which
yeah,
is a very good mark
it's
of an open mind.
It's a personal thing, and that's the point. The point is this is a personal thing, and the point that I said about the whole thing, the overall point of the Bible, to me, what I understand from my time reading and studying and listening to tons of people teach and read and study and getting their opinions, and then me still reading and studying on my own, getting my form and my own opinions, is that the point of the whole Bible is that we have a creator. And
your personal belief. There you go.
And the creator. Yeah. It's my personal belief. I have no qualms with telling you that it's my. I have no qualms with telling you it's my personal belief.
It's the personal belief of each individual. It doesn't have to be just in the book. It don't have to be in that church, the building. It can be sitting out on the back porch, enjoying the sunshine and feeling the connection with something bigger than you. I think my biggest objection is how these days, unless you get on TV and you talk about, I go to Catholic church and this black book is the only thing that matters, what's in here is absolutely real, is the thing that makes us as a society less, because we're missing the open-mindedness and the melding of you believe what you believe, I believe what I believe. Right. I can respect that. I just don't believe he has to be in a building or a book.
Well, that's the reason.
Everywhere. So,
I believe that God exists in every molecule that exists in what we can perceive. No, I believe that's how God, because the Bible teaches us. I get it from the Bible.
Yeah, and the Bible says that everything was created in 7 days too.
But God is omnipresent.
Right, and everything in the universe was created in 7 days.
But 7 days,
that's what the creation story says. Of course, there's about 10 different theories about that too.
Okay. What part of that do you believe, as far as the creation side? As far as that, as far as why the scientific claims in books that are parables, why would they even make those claims? And the Quran's the same way. They make even more extraordinary claims about outer space and what stars come from and what they are and whatnot.
So I don't have. So let's see. When it comes to the creation thing, there's the gap theory and there's the day is 1,000 years of God, the day is 1,000. That sort of stuff. I'm of the mind that I don't know. I mean, I can't know. None of us can know exactly. We can have our ideas. I would say that I would lean a certain way, maybe, but I don't. But I'm still not. And I made a man mad one time because I wouldn't settle on that. He's like, "Well, you're up here teaching, and you won't say which way you believe." And I'm like, "Well, I can't tell you that I know that something happened this way when I don't know. I don't. I don't know." And so I said, but now this is something interesting to think about. God didn't make the things that we measure time with until day 3. So,
I was going to ask you, how are you measuring days when the sun's not even created? Yeah,
right. How can you measure? Yeah. So I get it. Of course, the interesting thing about that too, though, is that the very first verse of the Bible, we know that this physical realm can exist without time, space, or matter, and neither of those three can exist without the other. Time, space, and matter, all three must always exist at the same. In the same, you can't have time without there being matter, space, and matter. So
you can have time and space without matter, though.
Yeah, well, you have nothing to, but you have nothing to measure time with if you don't have matter.
Well, and you can't have space without matter. I mean, it's got to be all three. And now,
so the very first.
Just to interject this really quick is, this goes back to science has proved there is a God. It's just not necessarily what's written in the book, which is the only thing I was actually trying to get at is, we as a species think we are the focus. This little black book is the end-all, be-all. But, we do finally have the marriage of there's got to be an outside observation, a greater being. I mean, I'm personally agnostic. I cannot understand or begin to understand the thoughts of God. I'm so tiny in the overall thing of it. But there is something there that has to let us be living in this, to have that black book of rules. We couldn't have those rules, regardless of how they are, without something bigger observing it. To let this happen,
And if you could contain God within your intellect, he wouldn't be God.
Right.
That's right.
So,
you
without
are
the free
God
without
in
the
your
free
own
will,
mind.
Pointless.
So yes, I do believe the Bible. But do I believe that the Bible is every answer and has everything in it and there's no more or no, that is not what I believe. Do I think that there's even books that have ever existed that contain it all? No. It's not possible because God is infinite. There's no way to put all of that into words. There's just no way to do it. So I completely understand that.
Yeah, we're trying to understand it with parables, putting stories down of things that maybe in that time, let's just say they were all true. People couldn't understand. The lights in the sky, well, that may have been meteors. I mean, we don't know because people couldn't understand it now. Now we have a better understanding. I mean, if you look back during the Bible, miracles happened all the time. How many times do you see the miracles in the Bible anymore? They don't really happen. Well, that tells me personally, and this is what I believe,
So what miracles are you speaking of, though?
The crippled man that could walk, the blind that could see. I mean, all the
they're doing that. They're doing that every day.
I can tell you the stories, bro.
Well, no, I know, but I'm just talking about in the Bible. They were written out. They were put down. They were written. They were put in a holy book. Why has there not been any more books added to the holy book? Can you say God was only active during the time period of the holy book? Did he suddenly go on sabbatical? Why is there no more books? There's no more parables being added to the Holy Bible. Did it suddenly, I've written all I can stand. I've taught y'all everything I can do. I'm going to stop writing. There it is.
So
there's the one.
So Dr. Michael Heiser puts it this way. He says, there's other books like, everybody knows the Book of Enoch and, some other things like that go on. And
but they're not accepted.
Well, what he says,
organized
like the Holy Bible.
Well, what he says is this, and this is what he teaches. Whether believe what you want to believe, but this is just what he says. These books are not in the Bible because they're not considered inspired, but that does not mean that they're not important and that we should not know them. Because he says it's obvious.
So why don't they promote them in the Holy Bible?
Because at one point
it's selective publishing.
Yeah, no, I do. I'm trying to tell you, I don't disagree with you on that at all.
Right.
I'm trying to tell you, I believe at some point there were people who decided, hey, we don't need to put this in the Bible because we're going to lose some control if anybody can ever read it. It's just like Brad and I were talking about today. What if we found out that giants were real?
Right.
And I don't want to get into this whole thing, but the point of it is,
go ahead.
If you find out that giants are real and were real, well, then that brings validity to the scriptures. Well, if it brings validity to the scriptures, it brings validity to everything that the scripture says. It may not be, you may not make it the end all we're all, but if the Bible's proven to be maybe a little bit more factual about certain things, well then that means that, well, maybe God's a little more true than he was to some people. Well, if God's more true, well, then there's a higher power that we answer to, more so than the government, more so than the people who are in charge.
But
more
what
so
is
than the
all
the
true?
opposite of it? See, there's a thing. Is the exact opposite could be there? Is the Holy Bible or the Quran? I mean, you take all the holy scriptures of any of the religions. They say this is the end all be all. Well, you have all these books floating out there that yes, the experts will say, yeah, these are legitimate, but nah, they don't really pertain. We're going to choose not to include these. If you think they're holy, they should be included and let people decide for themselves. Again, it goes back to if you buy the King James Version of the Bible, you're going to get a certain approved set of scriptures, worded a certain way. Everything's going to be done a certain way. Now, you buy the exact same Bible, but by a German company or a Gutenberg or anything else, it may read close, but there's going to be things that are different. So, again, it goes back to...
Well, even the King James has been revised 72 times.
Absolutely. So, how can you say what you're reading is that when you truly don't know?
Right.
So,
well, it's even a language... It's even a language issue, because even in the English language, we say things today that 50 years ago didn't mean that.
Let me ask you.
Like today, while we say gay nowadays, we're usually talking about a homosexual. But 50 years ago, when you said gay, you were talking about somebody being happy. Or if you said something was smart, it meant that it hurt. But nowadays, we're talking about being smart being something that means that you're more of an intellect or whatever. And so those kind of things change too. So there's those sort of things, and that's why a lot of those revisions happen. But it still doesn't necessarily compute, because like real simple version, Revelations, where it says where in my Father's house are many mansions. But we know that the Greek word that works, that what would work there better is rooms, and stuff like that, and there's different ones where even in the old manuscripts or even in the Dead Sea Scrolls, where there were words that were rubbed out, or the paper was torn, or things like that. And so, they lost words. And so there are words in there that are, that got added to try to fill in where something was lost. The thing about the Bible's interpretation of that is that with the Bible, the number of those that happen are far fewer than other books of antiquity. That's the only reason I was saying earlier about the validity of the being able to check it against the old copies, the oldest ones that we had, is that the lines of question are by far fewer in the Old and New Testaments compared to any other work of its age or the same, that we have. And so people talk about the Gaelic Wars or the Iliad of Homer and all those sort of things. The amount of evidence that's there for the biblical material is vastly superior. Like the Iliad of Homer, there's like 100 copies they have of the original, and there's something like 19,000 lines of question in it. And that could mean there's a letter or a word or something that was missing, But in the Bible, we have 55,000 copies of that were written copies of the original works down through the years, and there's something like in the Old Testament 90 lines of question. So there's a lot of evidence to show that it's trustworthy as far as have the translations down through the years kept the same. Now, when you get into a lot of these, the NIV and the New Living Translation and the this other stuff like that, some of those get wildly different, and they are wildly different. And of course, the King James came from the Genevan Bible, which is the original German Bible, was the Genevan one. And the Genevan one came from the Textus Receptus, which was the original copies of the letters to the churches.
Right.
And then you had the Alexandrian copies that were in the Library at Alexandria, which led to your NIVs and your NLTs and all that other stuff that came along. But that church burned. And then you have the differences in there where some of them say, well, this verse didn't exist in older copies, or, you know, this stuff like that, or, you know, a lot of those sort of things go on. And excuse me, my view on all of that is that I try to stick to what I know to be the closest to the original as possible, knowing that nothing I have is going to be perfect, and nothing I have is going to be exactly there. And that's also why I listen to Jewish rabbis talk about things in the Old Testament and what they mean, even though they don't agree with my theology or my thoughts on things, because I know they know the Hebrew language way better than I ever will, you know, or, you know, even Hebrew scholars. Excuse me. And so I listen to some of those people talk about stuff. I listen to people who from other language and thought processes. You know, Brad talks likes Alan Watts a lot. I've listened to a lot of his teaching and a lot of his talks, and I've listened to, you know, a lot of stuff. So, like, you know, a real prominent preacher nowadays is a man named John MacArthur. So, and a lot of people, you know, like John MacArthur, and he's a very smart individual and all that sort of thing. And I would say for a lot of things that he says, his what they call exegesis, his breaking down of the words and what they mean sort of thing is probably among some of the best that's out there. But I can't listen to it because he's the type of person that thinks that he's right and nobody else is. You know, he's like, I know the truth. Right. I'm the good. I know, and I can't listen to it because of that. Even though he's as intelligent and good at what he does as he is, I can't listen to him for that reason, because I'm like, if I've learned anything through my journey in this life, is that the more I think I know, the less I realize I know. You know?
So who makes it to heaven? The promised land?
To me, it's those who excuse me, those who understand that all of mankind is, you know, that we all, none of us are perfect, none of us are good in of ourselves, and that we choose to depend on our Creator to supply our goodness. It's Him who allows us into heaven, per se, if that's the way we want to put it. It's Him that allows us in there, and He provided the way for it. And it's because of Him that we do that, not because we're just going to be good people and you know, in our own righteousness we're going to do everything, you know, do everything right or whatever, because we can't do it right, you know. Well, we can do good things in our lives. Don't get me wrong. We can do good things in our lives, but inherently we all have skeletons in the closet. We all have things that we do wrong. We've all had those times where we have done wrong to people, you know, and we've acted.
And what about the folks, like say the people that were on, you know, the North and South American continent before the written word made it over? What happened to all those people? None of them made it into heaven because they didn't have a relationship with Jesus? Or are you just saying that?
No, I believe God said he revealed himself. He revealed himself to man through his creation. So I believe that they probably had their own understanding of who God was.
Does that go back to the different gods that you were saying earlier, when the big G told all the little G's, you're not doing what I told you to do? Or you're saying that maybe...
So I believe that some of the little G's, or I'd say all of the little G's, I believe that a great deal of them did deceive mankind into worshiping them and convince them that they were their salvation, that they were their God. But this was for their own selfish gain. And they were leading a lot of people astray in that way. And they were doing that through, you know, you had Baal worship, you had all these, devious acts going on and sacrificing children and all kinds of things that were going on during those times. And they were all doing this to these other gods, and you get down there in the Incans and the Mayans, and they're sacrificing people on top of these pyramids, trying to appease the sun god, and all those sort of things, because I believe these little G gods had these people fooled.
And do you still think the little G gods are around?
I'm not sure exactly how that works. I don't know if I do believe they are around. I don't believe they've been judged final yet. But I believe that because of certain things that happen, a great many of them have lost their influence. And when they've lost their influence, they've lost their power, because they are not.
When it said they were going to die, did they lose their immortality as well? Or no?
Well, death, spiritual death is separation from God, So I believe ultimately their death will be like it says in Revelation at the end, that death and hell were thrown into the lake of fire. So that's the end all and wherewithal is eternal separation from God. And so that's kind of where I am with that. I believe that a lot of people were deceived, and I believe that's part of the reason why God's, re-inherited the nations. I also believe that God just had people, throughout the course of all of mankind and history and everything else, that people were born in the place that where if they were going to know God, it was their most likely most likely case that where they were born and when and all that sort was their best chance, for knowing. But I know that in some places people just wouldn't, But it's just like even now in Muslim nations, it's crazy how Muslims have visions a lot, and they have visions of Jesus Christ a lot. It's kind of funny how that happens, but I've seen testimony after testimony after testimony after testimony of Muslims who converted to Christianity because they saw Jesus in their bedroom or, something else.
All right. Well, I've worked at a psych ward before, and I met Jesus every day, but it doesn't mean that there's 100 Jesuses either.
Right,
That's an observationist point
Maybe
of view.
that's how desperate they are, right?
Right.
Well, I still have to settle back on the point that I still think that the Bible is just a bunch of parables. They're very valuable parables. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
Like we've all agreed to. I think along the way, man has found ways to power control, and they add stuff, not maybe take whole Bible verses out, put stuff in translations, maybe errors that were unexpected, maybe unknown errors as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I and I don't disagree with you entirely, on that. But the other, there's just something I can't put my finger on it, but there is something about Jesus, and when I surrendered to that faith in Him, that I can't really describe what changed in me. And there's a couple of things to say about that when it comes to completely outside stuff. So back in the 90s, I watched these guys who were a part of, I don't remember the name of the society, but it's like the people that do all the UFO investigations. Gosh, what are they called? But they're the ones that do the interviews.
Paranormal investigators?
Well, they're not paranormal. There's a certain. It's a certain.
It's an official group.
It's like an official group. Yeah,
UFON. It's called like UFON or something like that.
Yeah, like UFON.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but there was these two guys who are members of UFON. They're official members, but they were interviewing people, and they were documenting something completely different. So they were interviewing people that once they were abducted, they called out to Jesus. They invoked the name of Jesus, and the abduction stopped. And they had 400 documented cases of this, detailed, cases of this people that were invoked the name of Jesus because they were scared, you know, of whatever was happening at the time, and it immediately ended, you know, and then, excuse me, and then they go back and they had some, you know, drawings or descriptions from people from earlier centuries that were describing the demons that had tormented them when they were going through exorcisms and stuff like that. And what they described sounded a lot like what we would call alien greys or whatever nowadays, and stuff like that. And, you know, there's the famous drawing of Aleister Crowley, talks about his mentor or whatever you want to call him.
See, I think aliens are the MK Ultra deal, though, man. I don't know.
MK Ultra.
Yeah,
well,
I think
you know, somebody years ago when they did the Freedom of Information Act deal, you know, the FBI vault got opened,
right?
And you could go to this website and you could see all these documents from that. Well, somebody posted a document from that and said, "Hey, look at this," and so it was talking about aliens, and they said, "But don't take my word for it. Go to the FBI vault website, go to this section, go to these dates, go to this section, this page, read it for yourself," you know. And so, and this was like early 2000s, and so I went, and there it was, and it was this memo. It was 1948, I think, and it was this memo to certain law enforcement officials and certain college professors that I would assume were scientists or whatever, and they were explaining to them in there that the beings were not extraterrestrial; they were extra-dimensional. Meaning they were from this planet. They were not from off-world, but they were from a different dimension. And they went through and named off all their, you know, this different stuff they were doing, this and the other. Excuse me. And so I started making the connection then that these were spiritual beings. And then when you get into the Book of Enoch, you read about the Watchers and, you know, and their houses of glass that fly through the air and, you know, all this sort of stuff that